From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Very often we talk about refugee crisis, but there's no refugee crisis, but only human crisis.
Today, in a Democracy Now! Special, world-renowned Chinese dissident artist Ai Weiwei for the hour. He's been called the most dangerous man in China and the most powerful artist in the world. We'll speak to him about art, human rights, power, and his epic new documentary, Human Flow, which is a sweeping look at the journey, the struggle of more than 65 million refugees worldwide.
Being a refugee is much more than a political status. It is the most pervasive kind of cruelty that can be exercised against a human being. You are forcibly robbing this human being of all aspects that would make human life not just tolerable, but meaningful in many ways.
We'll also get a sneak preview of his massive new art installation that spans across New York City's boroughs. It critiques the global rise of nationalism and the closure of borders. It's called Good Fences Make Good Neighbors.
The fence can be between neighbors, to divide, to set up some kind of border. It's about territory, about dividing, to push the others away or to stop others from crossing. Generally, it reflects a misunderstanding of humanity.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The powerful head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Tennessee Republican Senator Bob Corker, warned on Sunday that Trump is treating the presidency like a reality show and setting the U.S. on the path to World War III. Senator Corker made the comments to the New York Times after Trump spent much of the weekend threatening war with North Korea, and after Trump attacked Corker on Twitter Sunday morning, saying the senator didn't have the guts to run for re-election and claiming Corker dropped out after begging unsuccessfully for Trump's endorsement. That prompted Corker to respond on Twitter, quote, "It's a shame the White House has become an adult daycare center. Someone obviously missed their shift this morning," end quote. The president's spat with Senator Corker came as Trump repeated threats of war against North Korea throughout the weekend, tweeting, quote, "Presidents and their administrations have been talking to North Korea for 25 years. Agreements made and massive amounts of money paid hasn't worked. Agreements violated before the ink was dry. Making fools of U.S. negotiators. Sorry, but only one thing will work," end quote. In brief comments to reporters Saturday, Trump was asked to clarify that remark, as well as a cryptic comment he made last week during a meeting with top generals in which he warned about the calm before the storm.
Clarify your calm before the storm coming?
Nothing to clarify.
What's the one thing that'll work?
Well, you'll figure that out pretty soon.
Again, in that clip, a reporter asks, what is the one thing that will work regarding North Korea? Trump responds, well, you'll figure that out pretty soon. Trump's threats came as North Korea's Central News Agency accused the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency of plotting unsuccessfully to assassinate leader Kim Jong-un last May. In immigration news, President Trump said Sunday he won't restore the DACA program protecting hundreds of thousands of young undocumented immigrants from deportation unless lawmakers agree to expand the wall on the U.S.-Mexico border and move to keep out thousands of children fleeing gang violence in Central America. The Senate Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the proposal a non-starter, tweeting, "Nancy Pelosi and I told POTUS we were open to reasonable border security alongside DREAM Act. His list goes so far beyond what's reasonable," unquote. In September, President Trump said the U.S. would stop renewing applications for DACA. That's the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which gives nearly 800,000 undocumented immigrants permission to live and work in the United States. On the Gulf Coast, Hurricane Nate made landfall near the mouth of the Mississippi River in southeastern Louisiana Saturday night as a Category 1 storm, making a second landfall later that night near Biloxi, Mississippi. The storm brought power outages and flooding to parts of the region, but did not result in the sorts of damage seen by this year's far more powerful hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. Canada's government has agreed to pay out $750 million Canadian dollars to Indigenous people who are separated from their families as children and put up for adoption with non-Native families. The program, known as the 60s Scoop, ran from the 60s to the 1980s and affected as many as 30,000 children. Among them was Chief Marcia Brown Martell, chief plaintiff in the lawsuit.
I have great hope that because we've reached this plateau, that this again will never, ever happen in Canada again.
In Spain, hundreds of thousands of people rallied in Barcelona Sunday in a massive unity rally opposing independence for the country's Catalonia region. Organizers said nearly 1 million people attended the rally, while Catalan police put the number at 350,000. In either case, the rally was larger than a mass pro-independence mobilization last week. The rally came as Catalan leaders claimed about 90% of those who voted in a banned referendum a week ago supported independence. Spain's government called the independence drive unconstitutional and ordered a police crackdown on the vote, which left over 900 people injured. In Russia, police arrested more than 260 people in cities across the country Sunday as protesters defied a ban on rallies to call for an end to corruption and open elections on President Vladimir Putin's 65th birthday. The rallies came after a court sentenced opposition leader Alexei Navalny to his third jail term this year, saying he's ineligible to run for the presidency during an election next year. This is protester Alexei Pasternak, who joined a protest in the eastern city of Vladivostok.
We must understand how important it is when those in power are replaced in an orderly way, and how important it is to live without political persecution. We think it is wrong when a politician is regularly jailed for several days for some little things which police especially search for. So we came here to support Alexei Navalny. I cannot say that I support everything he does, but I think he is a real alternative for our country.
In the occupied West Bank, thousands of Israeli and Palestinian women marched to the shores of the Jordan River on Sunday, calling for an end to Jewish-only settlements and for a negotiated peace agreement. This is Israeli citizen Vivian Silver of the group Women Wage Peace.
We are organizing women from all over the country, from every side of the political spectrum, who are saying enough. Must speak. In Arabic, it's makafi. Enough. We're no longer willing to do this. We must reach a political agreement. We must change the paradigm that we have been taught for 7 decades now, where we've been told that only war will bring peace. We don't believe that anymore. It's been proven that it's not true.
In Mexico, the body of journalist Edgar Daniel Esqueda was found Friday in the central Mexican city of San Luis Potosi, riddled with bullet wounds and showing signs of torture. Esqueda's death came after the 23-year-old reporter repeatedly complained to a government-run human rights group that state police had threatened him over his journalism. In one incident, police ordered Esqueda to delete pictures from his camera after he photographed the aftermath of a police shootout. Esqueda is at least the 11th media worker killed in Mexico this year, matching last year's record death toll. In Ghana's capital city of Accra, at least 7 people were killed and 132 others injured Saturday when an explosion ripped through a state-owned liquefied natural gas station, sending a huge fireball into the night sky and setting off a secondary explosion at a nearby filling station. The blast was at least the 8th such explosion in Ghana over the last 4 years. In 2015, a similar blast in Accra killed over 100 people. Back in the United States and Hollywood, the Weinstein Company fired co-founder Harvey Weinstein Sunday, just 4 days after the New York Times reported the movie mogul was the subject of harassment and assault accusations for decades, and that he paid off at least 8 women who confronted him over the alleged humiliating and degrading harassment. Weinstein's firing came after 3 members of the company's board of directors resigned, along with 2 of Weinstein's attorneys, following the report in the New York Times. In Washington, D.C., a women's advocacy group set up a giant TV screen on the National Mall on Friday and looped a 2005 video showing Donald Trump boasting about sexually assaulting women. The 12-hour-long protest was organized by the group Ultraviolet on the first anniversary of the release of the Access Hollywood video, in which Trump boasts, quote, "When you're a star, they let you do it, grab 'em by the pussy," unquote. This is Ultraviolet campaign director Emma Borbor.
We want to remind the American people who the president really is and who he said he was on that tape, a proud, self-professed sexual predator. This is a prime example of how when you elect a man who is very hostile towards women, that he's now in office actively pursuing an anti-woman agenda.
Friday's protests came on the same day President Trump ended a federal requirement that employer-based health insurance cover the costs of women's birth control. In Charlottesville, Virginia, a few dozen white nationalists carrying torches gathered near a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee on Saturday night, 8 weeks after far-right protesters at a larger rally attacked anti-fascist protesters, injuring dozens and killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer. Saturday's rally was the 3rd in Charlottesville, organized by white nationalist Richard Spencer. It came after city officials covered the statue of Robert E. Lee in a black tarp last month in the wake of August violence, and after President Trump blamed both sides for the attacks, claiming there were very fine people among the far-right protesters. An FBI counterterrorism unit secretly identified so-called black identity extremists as a violent threat, according to a leaked document obtained by Foreign Policy magazine. In the report, dated August 2017, the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Analysis Unit writes, quote, "The FBI assesses it's very likely black identity extremist perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated, retaliatory, lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence," end quote. Civil liberties groups warn the black identity extremist designation threatens the rights of protesters with Black Lives Matter and other groups, and have compared it to the FBI's COINTELPRO program of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which targeted the civil rights movement. In Utah, hundreds of protesters gathered outside Salt Lake City Police Headquarters Sunday demanding murder charges be brought against a white police officer filmed shooting 50-year-old African-American Patrick Harmon as he ran from police. Salt Lake County's district attorney has cleared Officer Clinton Fox of any wrongdoing in the case, even though newly released police body cam video clearly shows the officer shooting Harmon 3 times in the back. A warning to viewers, this video is graphic.
Put your hand behind your back for me. 244, priority shots fired. Start medical.
Patrick Harmon had been pulled over by officers for not having a light on his bicycle. After the shooting, the district attorney's office claimed Harmon said, "I'll cut you," and turned to threaten officers with a knife. The claim is directly contradicted by the body cam video. And Vice President Mike Pence flew to Indianapolis Sunday, where he staged a walkout of an NFL game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Indianapolis Colts after players on both teams held a protest against racial injustice during the national anthem. Pence's decision to leave appeared pre-planned after President Trump said he asked his vice president to leave during any protest. More than 20 members of the San Francisco 49ers knelt during the anthem, while Colts players stood with locked arms, wearing shirts reading, "We will stand for equality, justice, unity, respect, dialogue, opportunity." This is San Francisco 49er safety Eric Reed, who joined quarterback Colin Kaepernick's national anthem protests last year, speaking on Sunday.
This is about systemic oppression that has been rampant in this country for decades, on top of decades. And I will continue to say and encourage people to educate themselves of how we got to where we are today, because it didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to happen overnight to fix these issues. It's really disheartening when everything that you were raised on, everything that I was raised on, was to be the best person I can be, to help people that need help. And the Vice President of the United States is trying to confuse the message that we're trying to put out there.
Vice President Pence's brief visit to Indianapolis cost taxpayers an estimated $250,000 after he traveled from Las Vegas to Indianapolis for the brief appearance at Lucas Oil Stadium before flying back to a fundraising event in California. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In a Democracy Now! Special today, we spend the hour with the world-renowned Chinese artist and activist Ai Weiwei. Art Review magazine has called him the most powerful artist in the world. He's also been called the most dangerous man in China. Ai Weiwei was born in 1957 in Beijing. His mother was writer Gao Ying. His father was the revered poet Ai Qing. The year after Ai Weiwei was born, his father was named an enemy of the people. He and his family, including one-year-old Ai Weiwei, were sent to hard labor camp in the Gobi Desert in remote northwest China. Ai Weiwei spent the next 16 years of his life growing up in hard labor camps with harsh living conditions and little formal education. The family had only one book, a large French encyclopedia. At 19, Ai Weiwei and his family returned to Beijing, and he enrolled in the Beijing Film Academy to study animation. There he became part of a group of avant-garde artists organizing against government control of the arts. Their slogan, "We demand political democracy and artistic freedom." He was also a part of a small political movement of students who produced posters calling for reforms and pasted them on a brick wall that came to be known as the Democracy Wall. When the leader of that movement was sentenced to 15 years in prison, Ai Weiwei decided to move to New York City. It was 1981. Ai Weiwei spoke no English, had $30 in his pocket. He settled on the Lower East Side and befriended Allen Ginsberg and other influential artists. He briefly studied at the Parsons School of Design, but dropped out after his professor told him his drawings had no heart. Instead, he held a string of odd jobs working in construction, cutting grass, cleaning houses, babysitting, even winning money in Atlantic City as a blackjack guru. In 1993, Ai Weiwei returned to China because his father was ill. He founded a highly influential architecture firm named Fake Design and dedicated himself to art and writing. In 2008, after a massive earthquake in Sichuan, China, Ai Weiwei launched a citizen investigation to collect the names of the more than 5,000 school children who died, partially as a result of the highly shoddy government construction of the schools. Ai Weiwei was highly critical of the government's response to the earthquake, saying, quote, "They intimidate, they jail, they persecute parents who demand the truth, and they brazenly stomp on the Constitution and the basic rights of man," unquote. While his citizen investigation catapulted him to international fame, it also enraged Chinese government officials. In 2009, his popular blog was shut down. A few months later, police broke into his hotel room and attacked him, punching him in the face and causing cerebral hemorrhaging. He had to have emergency brain surgery, which he documented in his film, So Sorry. Then he launched his most famous installation to date, a massive mosaic of 9,000 children's backpacks mounted on the exterior wall of the German art museum Munich Haus der Kunst. The backpack spelled out in Chinese characters the words of one mother whose child was killed in the earthquake, quote, "She lived happily on this earth for 7 years," unquote. In 2010, Ai Weiwei was placed under house arrest after the Chinese government demolished his studio. Then in 2011, he was arrested at the Beijing airport and held for 81 days without any charges. Chinese authorities seized his passport, refused to return it until 2015. Once that passport was returned, he moved to Berlin, Germany. He's also faced constant surveillance, a topic which he explored earlier this year in his exhibition Hansel and Gretel, set in New York's Park Avenue Armory, in which visitors are relentlessly tracked by cameras. Among his other famous installations was his 2010 show Sunflower Seeds at the Tate Museum in London, in which Ai Weiwei filled a hall of the museum with more than 100 million hand-painted porcelain sunflower seeds. He currently has a solo exhibition at the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. called Trace. The exhibit features 176 portraits of activists and free speech advocates made of Lego bricks. He also has a major new exhibition opening next week here in New York City, in which he's erecting security fences and cages across the boroughs, including under Washington Square Arch and in Central Park near Trump Tower, to explore the rise of nationalism and the closure of borders worldwide. It's called Good Fences Make Good Neighbors.
The fence can be between neighbors, to divide, to set up some kind of border. It's about territory, about dividing, to push the others away or to stop others from crossing. Generally, it reflects a misunderstanding of humanity.
Ai Weiwei is also the director of a major new documentary on the struggle, the journey of refugees worldwide called Human Flow. For the documentary, he traveled to 23 countries, visiting dozens of refugee camps. This is the trailer, which takes us to Iraq, Jordan, Gaza, northern Greece, and Kenya.
Being a refugee is much more than a political status. It is the most pervasive kind of cruelty that can be exercised against a human being. You are forcibly robbing this human being of all aspects that would make human life not just tolerable, but meaningful in many ways.
The more immune you are to people's suffering, that's very, very dangerous. It's critical for us to maintain this humanity.
Over 65 million people in the world today have been forcibly displaced from their homes.
I've been roaming endlessly with my son for 60 days now. Nobody has shown us the way. Where am I supposed to start my new life?
If children grow up without any hope, without any prospects for the future, without any sense of them being able to make something out of their lives, then they will become very vulnerable to all sorts of exploitation, including radicalization.
Why are you here?
We went for a stroll. For fun. It's the only place to escape in the big prison of Gaza.
The officials came here and told them, look, there's no way you're going to get papers to continue. Either you go voluntarily or we arrest you.
Witness the global journey of millions of men, women, and children. Filmed across 23 countries.
I respect
When does it open?
I respect the passport and I respect.
It's going to be a big challenge to recognize that the world is shrinking and people from different religions, different cultures are going to have to learn to live with each other.
That's the trailer for the new documentary Human Flow. It's directed by Ai Weiwei, the internationally renowned Chinese artist. He'll be back with us live after break.
这一条路向西啊，一直往前走吧，快点儿翻个墙啊，路上的鲜花盛开呢。孩子，你明天醒来，我在路上等着。这堵墙的那边有那么一片水啊，东方路的旅店好贵，朝阳医院比瞎子还黑。这条路的那边还是那堵破墙啊，沿途的旅店不咋地，可不要 轻易进去。姑娘跟着她奶奶吧，爷爷不在。
Just Climb the Wall, sung and written by Ai Weiwei. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United Nations says there are now more refugees worldwide than at any time since World War II. The journey and struggle of these 65 million refugees is the subject of Chinese artist and dissident Ai Weiwei's epic new documentary called Human Flow. For the documentary, Ai Weiwei traveled to 23 countries, dozens of refugee camps. He joins us now in our New York studio. Yes, the world-renowned Chinese artist, dissident, activist Ai Weiwei. He's received so many awards, including the 2015 Ambassador of Conscience Award from Amnesty International, the 2012 Václav Havel Prize for Creative Dissent from the Human Rights Foundation. He's now the Einstein Visiting Professor at the Berlin University of the Arts, also director and producer of this new documentary that's opening around the country, Human Flow. Ai Weiwei, it's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Talk about why you decided to make this epic film that took you across the world. You, a man who have yourself been internally displaced in China, had to leave China. Talk about your life and how it intertwines with this story in the film.
Well, 2015, I got my passport back so I can start to travel. I went to Germany. And in Germany, you're facing the reality about 1.2 million refugees come to the land. So make me wonder, who are they? And I decided to go to Greece and Lesbos to really look at those people and how they get on the land. So in there, I met the first
You
boat.
went to Lesbos in Greece?
Lesbos in Greece. So on the shore, I met the first boat approaching the shore, and I see those people, women, children, and old people. Some are crying. Just unthinkable situation. Climb down this little boat, and then another boat. Sometimes you can have 30, 40 boats a day. And so it makes me really wonder and have a curiosity about what is really going on in the world today. So I decided to move my studio to Lesbos. And we have 20, 30 people there, start filming. And eventually we have to go to the other side, Turkey, and go to Middle East, and go to Asia and Africa to make this film. It's a very big film, but takes us about 1 year to finish. We visit about 23 nations, 40 camps, and interviewed about 600 people, and has 900 hours of footage.
So you went to the Middle East as well. Where did you go?
We went to first Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel, Gaza. Then our team also go to Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all those places.
What did you find in Gaza?
Gaza is a situation not people being pushed away from home, but being put in like a big jail. Millions of people stays within this their border, and they cannot leave. So the situation is extremely difficult. They only have a very little resource, and many people survives only from the help from the United Nations. And water polluted. Electricity only give a few hours a day, so it's an extremely difficult situation.
And where did you go in Israel?
Israel, I have been Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and all those locations. And West Bank, in Palestine area.
want to turn to a clip from Human Flow, your new documentary. This is Dr. Cem Terzi from the Association of Bridging Peoples. He works with Syrian refugees in Turkey.
There is nothing in this agreement in favor of refugees. Turkish law system only allow them under the temporary protection. It means they have no international right here. One day, the government decides, I will send them back. The government can do this because they are not defined as a refugee. No international right for them. They need a social integration program, job permits. They need jobs. They need a standard income and to buy food or to pay their rent. The children need to go to school. Majority of them, last 5 years, didn't go to school even one day.
That's Dr. Cem Terzi from the Association of Bridging Peoples who works with Syrian refugees. Tell us more about him and what you found there.
The doctors, volunteers, and they have been a major force to helping the refugees in Turkey. And recently he has been fired, and with 12 other professors, because a year ago they signed some peace treaty. So many, even those doctors his own life is threatened or in Turkey. And their team really did a lot of work for helping refugees and to take medical care for them.
I want to go back to your own story, especially for young people who are tuning in around the world right now. Talk about your parents. Talk about what happened to you in China.
I was born in 1957. That's the year my father was purged as a so-called rightist.
He had been a friend of Mao Zedong?
Yeah, he's same generation, a little bit younger than Mao Zedong, and they all spent time before the new nation established. So he belongs to this early revolutionary group. And he's a poet. He studied in Paris, and right after he came back to China, he was being put in jail for 6 years. Then later joined the revolution. After the 49, he was criticized. And with about 500,000 of the intellectuals in China, they're being all put in the labor camps to call it re-education. So I grew up in these camps. During the Cultural Revolution, he really has to do very hard labors, insulted, beaten, and
this was in the Gobi Desert?
Yeah, in the northwest, the Gobi Desert, very farthest location you can get on Chinese map.
And what was your understanding of what happened to you as a child?
As a child, you have no way to think otherwise because everybody is in extremely difficult situation. You think it's like you stand in the rain everywhere is under the rain. It's not. There's no exception. So he spent about 20 years cannot write words. To doing a lot of. To clean the public toilet, and he often been beaten, and very. Sometimes he comes home with all the ink poured from his head. It's become totally black, and going through a lot of this kind of insulting.
They poured ink over his head.
Yeah. It's just there's a lot of
meetings. The meetings he have to stand in front of the people, and they would say all kind of bad words about him, and he has to confess his crime, which he never committed any crime.
And what about your mother?
My mother.
She also was raped.
Yeah, she also have to struggle. She has to try and find something to feed those children, and we're living underground. It's like a hole you're digging down, and you just the whole family living underground.
You helped your father burn your whole library, except for this one French encyclopedia?
Yeah, one day, my father have a huge collection of books, art books about Impressionist, about Renaissance, and even medieval artworks. Because the right guard always come to my home, have to check on those books every page by page. They would, if they find anything like nudity or abstract art, they would really start to really question my father, and it's humiliating about him. So one day my father said, we have to burn all those books because those books attract so many people to come to our home. So I helped him to burn those books page by page, because there's and a lot of poetry books. He's a literary man, has a huge collection of books. So we burned it, everything.
And the next day you were sent off to the labor camp?
Yes, soon after we sent to the labor camp.
So you lived in this remote area of China for how long?
I stayed till I was 18 or 19. Then after Chairman Mao's death, he has been, how do you call it, rehabilitated.
Rehabilitated?
Yeah, yeah. So we moved to Beijing.
And you went to school?
Yeah, that time university started to open again after 10 years shut down. I went into Beijing Film Institute.
And you immediately got involved with politics and freedom of expression movements there.
Yeah, at that time, this first time China have a war, we call it a democracy war. So we put our artworks, our writings, our poetry on that wall. And very soon after, the war being turned down, and people got involved, some of them being put in jail. So that's the reason I decided how to leave China.
I mean, you knew right away, of course. You just come out of exile. You knew what you faced doing what you did.
Yes, it's unbelievable. You think China just after Cultural Revolution, and everybody has to think about the lessons they paid for this kind of harsh political movement. Then some young people started thinking how to make the nation or change it or to protect it from this kind of political event. Then immediately Deng Xiaoping crashed the students and the people who is trying to make China more progressive.
So you left and you came here to the United States?
Yeah, I had a chance, so I left. I come to United States. I stayed in New York about 10 years.
Lower East Side?
Yeah, I stayed Lower East Side and Brooklyn, and most time Lower East Side, 3rd Street between A and B.
You befriended Allen Ginsberg?
Yes, he is in the neighborhood, and he went to China at that time. And after he comes back, he had a poetry reading in St. Mark's Church. So I was listening to his reading, and he talked about China trip. He said he had met a poet. So I figured out that's my father because the story he's telling. So when he comes down, I said, you just met my father. So he was very surprised. Then we become friends.
So you ended up returning to China despite all you'd been through because your dad was ill. in 1993.
Yeah, the time I moved out to China, I was telling my mom I would never go back. You know, I told her, you know, my mom was very worried when she sent me to the airport because this child has no money and knows nothing about English. I told her, don't worry, I'm going home. So she's kind of sad. She knows I will never come back to China. But after 12 years, I decided to go back, and because my father was ill.
And how did you operate? What kind of space did you have there then? And talk about your art and ultimately what you did with the Sichuan earthquake, which was, what, about 10 years later in 2003?
Yeah. By 1993, I went back. China had some change. You know, people become better off. You know, there's a road being fixed and some tall buildings in the city. But basically, it never changed the political structure. So there's no freedom of speech, no independent press. You know, it's still very harsh on any kind of ideas or discussion. So I come up with an idea to publish some underground books to document Chinese art movement. So every year we made a book. The book has no title, just black cover, gray cover, or white cover, in protesting the censorship. And those books documents the underground movement of art at that time, because this simply no any newspaper or magazines would talk about contemporary art. Then I opened the first art gallery in China. It's a non-profit place to show undergroundly about Chinese art. Then by 2000, I curated the art show. The title is "Fuck Off." It's about also about contemporary young artists' work. And yeah, but at that time I was involved in architecture. I did a lot of architecture projects, about 60 projects, till finally I got involved with the National Stadium for Olympics. We call it a Bird Nest. And after that, I quit the architecture. And by 2005, I had a chance to learn how to use internet and started typing and writing articles. Suddenly, I become very, very popular on the internet because I would write 3-4 articles a day, and next day I would see a few 100,000 articles repost. So I thought this is a really beautiful thing you can do, and with this nation has no tradition of freedom of speech, and people basically are very scared about their writing, but I openly discuss politics or anything, you know, with my own independent view or opinion. So I got I was so popular, you know, for a very short time. Then I got involved with Sichuan earthquake citizens investigation and
the Sichuan earthquake, 2008.
Yeah, trying to find these 5,000 students who was vanished during this earthquake, and of course, that's related to government corruption and badly built buildings. So all those, a lot of other effort, argument about a lot of judicial cases, because that's the biggest problem in China. So all those things brought the government to have, I would say they dislike me, or.
Well, you did this. You showed the images of the children, I wanted to show images from the installation you made called So Sorry from 2009, creating this installation called Remembering on the facade of the Munich Museum. Can you talk about this in Germany? That would then travel the world. I saw it at the Brooklyn Museum.
Yeah, once I got totally involved in this kind of life, a real situation, I often want to find a language to express it in the art context. So that time I do have art shows, and so I always build a work in relating to my research or my findings. And the show in Munich and also in Brooklyn, you can see some works are really relating to Sichuan earthquake.
You took the children's backpacks.
But I redesigned the backpacks. Yes, this is need a lot. This is 9,000 backpacks.
And you wrote out the words of the mother.
Yes, that's Yang Xiaowan is the girl who got killed, and her mom very touched. There's another person arguing the rights of those students, because basically China is silent about all those things. So I made a quite dramatic arguing with about 60 articles I write about Sichuan earthquake.
And the poor architecture and the poor building standards.
Yeah, we have a lot of investigations, materials, and the site visit. So we have a concrete proof, evidence about how those buildings has been collapsed.
And you wrote out the words with the backpack, what the mother said. She lived happily for 7 years in this world.
Yes, that's what her wish. She said, I don't want to get government pension. All I want is people to remember my daughter has been living happily for 7 years.
We're going to break, and when we come back, what happened to you next? What launched you back into the world outside of China after you were arrested and beaten? Ai Weiwei is our guest, the world-renowned Chinese dissident, artist, activist. Stay with us. Give Tomorrow Back to Me by Ai Weiwei. Yes, this is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest for the hour is Ai Weiwei. Yes, spending the hour with the world-renowned Chinese artist, dissident, activist. In 2008, after the massive Sichuan earthquake in China, Ai Weiwei launched a citizen investigation to collect the names of the more than 5,000 school children who died partially as a result of the highly shoddy government construction of the schools. While a citizen investigation catapulted him to international fame, it also enraged Chinese government officials. In 2009, his popular blog was shut down. A few months later, police broke into his hotel room, attacked him, punching him in the face, causing cerebral hemorrhaging. He had to have emergency brain surgery, which he later documented in his film So Sorry. In 2010, Ai Weiwei was placed under house arrest after the Chinese government demolished his studio. Then in 2011, arrested at the Beijing airport, held for 81 days without any charge. Chinese authorities seized his passport, refused to return it until 2015. So after this your exhibition, showing the children, challenging the government. What did happen to you in 2009?
I was trying to do a test as a witness for fellow investigators who is going to be sentenced. So I went to Strand. We stayed in a hotel. The next day, the court was open. And at midnight, a few dozen police just rushed in. I think it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. They broke in the door, and it's in the dark, and we had some argument. I feel this punch right on my face, and then after that, they seized us in the hotel, so we couldn't make appear in the court, so till the court finished. So after that, I feel headache. So I had a show in Munich, so I have to travel to Munich. In Munich, I went to a hospital. They found out I have a hemorrhage in my, the bleeding is in my brain. So immediately we had an operation. Then if I don't have this operation, they said I will be finished. And and after that, the situation even getting worse. Police follows me all the time, and of course they trying to intimidate me. But by 2011, I was kidnapped in the airport, being put a black hood on my face and taken to a secret location. And in that location, I was kind of jailed, but it's like a military base for 81 days. Till now, nobody knows where this location is. And 2 soldiers would stand in front of me, the kind of military soldiers, about 80 centimeters away. They would look at me like this and stand still and, doesn't make any kind of move. Day and night, 24 hours a day, and even when I sleep or when I take a shower or go to toilets, they also have to stand right in front of me. And I've been going through about 50 interrogations. The crime they accuse me is subversing state power, so which is the biggest crime you can commit in China. And that's what happened.
But they gave you your passport back in 2015.
First, they told me I will be sentenced over 10 years because of my crime. And I could believe them because compared to other people, there's many people has been put in jail, also sentenced. I will be much more extreme condition than them. So just one day suddenly they said, get out, you can leave. Yes.
And what difference did international solidarity make for you?
That moment, I don't know any kind of support because it's totally sealed. You cannot get a lawyer. Your family doesn't know where you are, and also you cannot let any information out. It's not possible. So I don't know there's a strong international outcry.
Both of your lawyers are currently in jail.
Yeah, they are still serving time in jail, 5 years and 11 years, both of them.
Even your imprisonment, your beating, you turned into an art installation.
Yes, after I come out, many people question me what it's like being in that kind of condition. So I found out language is very difficult to describe it. So I made exact same situation in a sculpture or installation, and every detail fits exactly like the reality.
Didn't you photograph the police taking you?
No, nobody can photograph it. My phone is being taken away, and even police think I have some photos of the location because they couldn't believe I can make the situation so real. I told them, you're dealing with an artist. So I memorized all the details in the room.
The iPhone that you use, that you started Human Flow with, I know you're holding it right now in your hands. You're taking pictures in the studios. You take selfies with people and you on their phones so that they can have it. Mm-hmm. What has that phone meant to you?
I think it works two ways. First, for me to get first-hand information about what's going on in the world, and second, to reflect my expressions to the world. So it's like a mirror, but it works on both ways.
But you also the main theme of your work is surveillance, like the Hansel and Gretel exhibit at the Park Avenue Armory, drone surveillance. These phones are the ultimate device for surveillance.
It's true. It can examine the world, but also it has, it also examines my life, and I did many works talk about surveillance. In my household, there's about 25 cameras set up by police. And also inside my room, I later found out a box under the electricity wires, everywhere. They really think me as a very dangerous person.
Before we end this show, you are back in the United States right now, though you're not living here. Your film is opening across the United States. But I do have to ask you about President Trump and his relationship with your country, with China, and what he has meant, your concerns about him now?
Well, you have a very active president. Each day it brings surprise to the media and to people, His true relationship with China is very hard to say. He's going to visit China very soon. And, today's politics, so many things are hidden. You never know what's in his mind. And also, you start to doubt what really United States policy or principle is.
Look at North Korea.
In dealing with North Korea, or in dealing even just with Mexico, the neighbor, the beautiful neighbor we have here, they would call them criminals or rapists.
You went to the border wall.
Yeah, it's very hard to take this kind of response to see if that's a true thinking of this man, or does he really have a right judgment on the sense. So it's very difficult to really make any kind of analyzing about him.
You said yesterday at the New Yorker Festival that China likes him because he makes America look bad.
I think, yes, not only make U.S. look bad, but also anything, could bring some trouble to U.S. It would benefit China. China has been enjoyed the development after 9/11. When this world is talk about terrorists, and China had a long, peaceful development for quite over 10-some years. So, yeah.
Are you worried about President Trump triggering World War III?
I think the situation is quite fragile. And if we talk about the danger, yes, there's a potential dangers there.
Well, we'll leave it there. Ai Weiwei, thank you for being here. Ai Weiwei, the world-renowned Chinese artist and activist, director and producer of the new documentary Human Flow. He also has a major new exhibition opening in these next weeks in New York City, erecting security fences and cages across the boroughs to expose the rise of nationalism and the closure of borders worldwide. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.